Good afternoon. We're going to call this meeting to order at this time, and as our tradition, we will take a few moments of silence and meditation to think about those things for which we rejoice and those things for which we seek help. Thank you. And I seek help in getting through this meeting tonight, so y'all bear with me. We're going to ask now to consider a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Do I hear a motion?
I'd like a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go for the vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
And Mr. Gorham?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that's unanimous. This time we will consider a motion to ratify the election of officers of the board, with Angela Guest being elected president of the board and Chad Gorham being elected vice president at the specially called meeting of the board on November 22nd, 2017. Do I hear a motion?
I make a move that we ratify.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
At this time, we'll call for a discussion, and I will share with those of you gathered here who've not seen that in an agenda before. The meeting that we held on November 22nd, there was not enough notice at that point in time prior to the meeting for that to stand without looking at it again at this meeting to make sure that everything is done in proper order so that everything is nice and legal and tidy the way it should be. So that is why we're calling for that vote now. We have a motion and a second. So, Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Gant? And Mr. Gorham?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that passes. And that had to pass in order to get to item B. We're considering a motion to accept the resignation of Dr. Angela Guest from the office of board president. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
At a point of discussion, at our last call meeting, the members of this board completely surprised me and honored me by electing me to the position of board president. Since that meeting, I've had time to reflect on the responsibilities of the position. And I've concluded that at this time, family and other commitments prevent me from providing the availability and the leadership that this school district deserves from a board president. I've talked with members of the board individually, expressing my appreciation for the confidence that they have shown in me and explaining my concerns. And now I am asking them to accept my resignation in order for the board to move forward with the election of a new board president. No other discussion. We'll call for the vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
And Mr. Gorham?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that motion carries. I want to thank you for your vote, gentlemen. In fact, I think you have helped me set a new record. I believe I now hold the record for the shortest term as a school board president in the state's history, and so I can cross off breaking a record on my bucket list. But I also want to say that I hope there is no misinterpretation of my leaving the presidency, because I still look forward to serving as a board member and work very hard to be a good board member. Now I will leave this seat and get back over here where I belong and allow our very capable vice president to take over the meeting.
we will now entertain nominations for board officers for the upcoming year. So first we have board president. Do we have a nomination for board president?
I
know.
nominate Chad Gorham.
I second.
Not so fast.
you have to second nomination, but you.
Not so fast, Dr. Gass. So Mr. Story nominates Mr. Gorham. Is there another nomination for board president? Hearing none, we're still going to move to a vote. So all in favor of Mr. Gorham, myself being board president, we're going to vote. So Mr. West,
Yes.
Mr. Story,
Yes.
Mr. Gant,
Yes.
and Dr. Guess.
Yes.
So I will be the board president for the upcoming year. We will take nominations for board vice president at this time, the seat that I vacate.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
since all of us have had the wonderful opportunity to serve as a board officer, except Mr. West, I nominate Mr. West as vice chair.
Okay. So Mr. Gant nominates Mr. West for vice president of the board. Do we have any other nominations? I will nominate Dr. Guess. So we have Mr. West as a nomination and Dr. Guess as a nomination. Do we have any others? Hearing none, we will take a vote on this, and since we have two, we only want you to vote one time. So we will take Mr. West first, and we're going to start with Mr. West. If you choose to vote for Mr. West, say yes. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
And Dr. Guess?
I abstain.
Dr. Guess abstains. And so we have, I'm casting my vote for Dr. Guess since I nominated her. All right, so we have 3 votes for Mr. West and a no vote and 1 abstain. So without moving to the other votes, Mr. West will be the vice president of the board for the upcoming year. Congratulations, Mr. West. All right, so we will move on and deeper into the agenda. The next item was we have to consider a motion to ratify the action of the board at its specially called meeting, November the 22nd, 2017, to employ William W. Sanderson as special counsel to conduct an investigation and report to the board his findings regarding the allegations previously made against board member West under the School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012, and all the actions taken subsequent thereto. Do we have a motion? I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I think it was Dr. Guess. Do we have any discussion on that ratification? We do not. Hearing any discussion, so we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. West votes yes. Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guess?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is yes, so that has now been approved. Under E, we have consider a motion to approve the 2017-18 technology plan.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Dr. Guess is going to make the motion.
I'll second
Mr. Story seconds that. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
it. Yes.
Dr. Guess?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. That motion carries. Under personnel actions, we have a retirement. Under A, consider a motion to accept the retirement of Patsy Hicks as a teacher at Bryant School effective December the 1st, 2017.
I make that move.
Okay, Mr. Gant makes that motion.
Second.
Yes, seconds. Is there any discussion? All right, we will move to a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guess?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Under resignations, we have to consider a motion to accept the resignation of Brian Foshee as a welding instructor at the Ernest Pruitt Center of Technology, effective December the 20th, 2017. So that is at the end of the semester.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Story makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that motion. Is there any discussion?
Could somebody give us a reason why Mr. Foshee's?
I think he's taking another job. He said he could make more money out in the workforce, out in the.
That's kind of what I'd heard as well. Mr. Foshee, this is his first year to be with us, and I think there were several applicants for the job, so hopefully we will have several more that will apply. Welding, I think Mr. West can tell us for sure, but that's one of the more popular programs at the tech school, so it's definitely something that our kids are interested in and puts them to work making good money. So
I just wondered if it was because he is overloaded with students. Had too many.
I think it was about, the best I remember is about more money.
all right, so we have a motion and a second, and we've had a little discussion with that. So if there's no more discussion, we'll move to a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guess?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is yes, and that motion carries. B, consider a motion to accept the resignation of Suzanne York as a pre-K teacher at Pisgah, effective December the 20th, 2017. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Under employment, we have consider a motion to employ Emily McCarson as a pre-K aide at Hollywood, effective December the 5th, 2017. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Story, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guess?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. B, consider a motion to employ Stephen Kane as a maintenance worker at the bus garage, effective December the 5th, 2017, and that's pending his background clearance.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to approve that.
Story makes a motion to approve that employment. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Mr. West?
Abstain.
Mr.
He's
West.
related to me.
Okay, Mr. West abstains. Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that carries 4-0, 1 abstain. Consider a motion to employ Amy Bird as a countywide social worker, effective December the 8th, 2017, pending background clearance.
Make that motion.
Dr. Guest makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Story seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll get ready for a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is yes, and that motion carries, and I think it's going to be a very valuable piece to what we offer here in Jackson County. D, consider a motion to employ Patricia Gann as a countywide special education services aide, effective December the 5th, and that is pending the completion of the work keys assessment.
I make that move.
Mr. Gant makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Consider a motion to employ Casey McKinley as a countywide special education services aide, effective December the 5th, 2017.
Make that motion.
Dr. Guest makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Story seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant,
Yes.
and myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Consider a motion to employ Stacy Dobbs as a countywide bus driver effective December the 5th, 2017.
I make the motion.
Mr. Story makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. G, consider a motion to employ Josh Webb as a 4-hour custodian at Pisgah effective December the 5th, 2017.
I make the motion.
All right, Mr. Story makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Consider a motion to employ April Ferguson as a temporary C&P worker at Section High School effective December the 5th, 2017. This will be for the remainder of the school year. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Dr. Guest makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Story seconds that. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing no discussion, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. I consider a motion to employ Cassidy Grist as a countywide special education services aide. And this would have been effective November the 27th, 2017, so this is kind of retro. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Story makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will move to a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Consider a motion to employ Megan Pope as a countywide special education service aide effective December the 5th, and that is pending her background clearance. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Story seconds that. Is there any discussion with this item? Hearing no discussion, we'll move to vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Consider a motion to employ Nancy Lawman as a 21st century after-school teacher at Stevenson Elementary effective December the 5th, 2017.
I make that move.
Okay, Mr. Gant makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and that motion carries. Thirdly, we have a disciplinary matter, and it's going to be a report of the findings of the investigation regarding the allegations made against Mr. West, a board member under the School Board Governance Act, and they were going to allow a response. But as we begin this matter, the process that the board will follow will be for Mr. Porter, our board attorney, to give a brief summary of the report prepared by Mr. Sanderson. After that, Mr. West or his representative will be allowed to give a response to the allegations. No questions and answers will be allowed either from the board or Mr. West, since the law simply provides that the board member can respond orally or in writing to the allegations contained in the notice. After both statements are heard, the board will entertain a motion to go into executive session to deliberate the matter. With the procedure being established, Mr. Porter, will you please provide that summary for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Gorham. I will, and I will do my best to summarize the report that was prepared by Mr. Sanderson. This matter is brought under the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012, and Section 16-1-14.1, which is commonly called the Governance Act, and it's been in effect since 2012. And it basically provides for the governance of school board members, their conduct during meeting, and their conduct as board members. And each of the board members is required to agree to a board member code of conduct that is and was adopted by the Jackson County Board of Education. So that's the background, and on November the 1st, the board voted to give board member West notice of its intent to consider imposing sanctions for violation of the Governance Act. And I do want to let the board know, so you know what the allegations are. I want to read what the allegations are so that you know what's at stake here and what the subject of the matter is. So on November the 2nd, Mr. West was sent a letter from Mr. Dukes, the superintendent, based upon the vote of the board on November 1, 2017. And it says, in essence, that on November 1, at a specially called board meeting, the board voted to give Mr. West notice of the board's intent to investigate certain actions that he had taken as a board member, and to provide him with an opportunity to respond, and then to determine whether or not censure or reprimand would be appropriate sanction under the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act for neglect of duty or willful misconduct, and all this is under that Governance Act. And these are the allegations. There are 9 of them. Number 1 is breach of board policy 5.70, board code of conduct, and FERPA, which is federal statute, the forwarding of confidential student records to an unauthorized third person on October 3rd, 2017. Number 2 is breach of board policy 5.70, board code of conduct, and FERPA by forwarding confidential student records to an unauthorized third person on October 18th, 2017. Third is breach of board policy 5.70, board code of conduct, and FERPA by forwarding confidential student school records to a second unauthorized third party on October 25, 2017. Number 4 is breach of board policy 6.65 and board member code of conduct by forwarding confidential employee records to an unauthorized third party on August 22nd, 2017. Number 5 is breach of board policy, same board policy, for forwarding confidential employee records to an unauthorized third person on September the 6th, 2017. Allegation number 6 is the same violation for forwarding confidential employee records on October 3rd, 2017. Item number 7 is the same violation for forwarding confidential employee records to an unauthorized third party on October 18, 2017. Number 8 is a violation of the same policy, same board member code of conduct for forwarding confidential employee records to a third party on October 25, 2017. And the 9th allegation is that he attempted to direct or corrupt the operation of the school system in a manner that is inconsistent with the statutory functions and responsibilities of the superintendent by interfering with the administration of the day-to-day activities of local school and school personnel. So those are the allegations. And then on November the 22nd, as was ratified today, the board commissioned attorney Woody Sanderson of Huntsville to conduct an impartial investigation. And as part of that investigation, and you'll see in his report, he talked to the superintendent, he talked to Mr. West, I think he talked to Mr. West's counsel, he talked to administrators, several principals, other employees, and also received some documentation from the technology coordinator regarding these emails that we're talking about. He provided a full report to the board. It's 14 pages long, which we're not going to read the entire thing, but I'm going to try to do my best to summarize a few of those items. And it was finished yesterday, I think, and forwarded to all the board members and the superintendent yesterday. And I'm going to give the president a copy of that for the records so that it can be part of the records.
Thanks, sir.
At this time. So, the part of this, Mr. Sanderson goes into great detail about his investigation, about these emails, but as the board members, back in January or sometime after Mr. Duke took office, there was a change in the method by which agendas and information was provided to the board. Sometime during that time, it was put on the email, and certain documents were included in the information provided to board members. And it was at that time, it was password protected. There were some difficulties with some of the board members being able to access those records. So then the records were then, after some date, they were sent to the board members by email, just directed to the board members, but they were not password protected, which means that you didn't have to have a password to get into it. So based upon all of that, in addition to the agenda that was sent by email, there were other sensitive and confidential information attached to those emails as attachments. All of the applications, all of those documents that the board is supposed to see to fill employee positions, that was included. The applications that were submitted, which includes non-employees and also employees who were looking for transfers and for other jobs, that was included. There were items included regarding disciplinary action regarding students. So some student information was in those emails. And so the allegations are, part of the allegations are that Mr. West forwarded those emails, including those sensitive documents, to third parties who had no right or authorization to receive them. So, having gone through that, then Mr. Sanderson, after talking to all these folks and looking at the records, he found that on August 22nd, Mr. West did in fact forward the email with the invitation to view link, which included this confidential information, to a third party. On September 6th, he did the same thing. On October 3rd, he did the same thing. October 18th, he did the same thing, additional emails. October 25th, he did the same thing. These were a series of emails that Mr. West sent to third parties that contained this confidential information. Then Mr. Sanderson goes on and says that although Mr. West knew that the documents accessible through the invitation to view link included documents provided in support of the agenda items for each of the reference meetings, no finding can be made that Mr. West knew or realized when he forwarded the link that the documents included personal identifying information of applicants or employees or confidential education records. So basically what he found was he could not determine from what he found that it was intentional action by Mr. West to forward or disclose personal confidential information. Then he goes on to find that distribution of sensitive personal information pertaining to current board employees clearly violates board policy 6.65, in which the board has determined that the administration should consider such file confidential. That is, as personal information about employees, including social security numbers, addresses, email addresses, and other pertinent information from employees. So basically he found that was a violation of board policy. He also found that the distribution or dissemination of the agenda packet that includes confidential personal identifying information to an employee is also a violation. And that is another employee who had no right to receive that information. So those were part of his findings that the forwarding of the emails to a third party was a violation of board policy that says that that information is to be kept confidential. The second phase of the investigation regarding emails involves student records. And Mr. Sanderson found that student information related to proposed student discipline, which is included with the distribution of the board agenda to members of the Jackson County Board of Education, constitutes educational records. That is, those things that were in there, in the emails, that is an educational record. He identified those as educational records under FERPA. It goes on to say that this also is supported by board policy 5.70, that says that student information is to be held confidential. And in his findings, he finds that the educational records of 4 students were included in the agenda packet for October 4 meeting, and the education of 3 students were included in the agenda packet for October 19, 2017. Access to these records was provided by Mr. West when he forwarded the invitation to view and received an email on that same date. Mr. Pete goes on to say that Mr. West denies that he knew that the referenced educational records were accessible through the email link he forwarded to third parties. or that he intended to provide access to any documents other than the agenda, and no findings can be made to the contrary. And he goes on to say, though, that nothing in FERPA, board policy, or board code of conduct excuses unknowing or unintentional dissemination of educational records or confidential non-public information in a manner not permitted by FERPA, board policy, or board code of conduct. So he goes on to find that the distribution of that material is a violation of not only FERPA, but also board policy regarding those student records. And I do want to read you the summary, because I think the summary just kind of, well, it's a summary that it concludes with this statement. It says, in summary, with respect to the first 8 charges, and that is regarding the email distribution, Mr. West's actions in forwarding email links which allowed unauthorized persons to have access to personal identifying information of employees and educational records of students violated board policy 6.65, board code of conduct, and the student code of conduct, FERPA, and possibly Alabama Code section 41-13-6. However, this investigation can make no finding that the distribution of such information was knowingly or intentionally made by Mr. West. Then he goes on to say, with respect to the 9th charge, and that is regarding Mr. West's conduct and his involvement with the superintendent, says, with respect to the 9th charge in the November 2nd, 2017 letter, the level of Mr. West's involvement in inquiry into selection of personnel and to the operational details of capital improvement projects without adequate communication with affected administrators is a legitimate issue of concern under the board's code of conduct. The issue of whether Mr. West's conduct is consistent with board code of conduct is a subjective one, which is left to the discretion of the board. However, as to this charge, no facts have been discerned which support a finding that Mr. West, in his interactions with the superintendent or other administrators, has violated any specific Alabama law or board policy other than a possible failure to adhere to the standards set out in the board's code of conduct. So those were his findings. Again, they're all contained in his 14-page report, but that is a quick and dirty summary of what he found. The board should have already seen the entire report, and as a copy is submitted to the president for the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Porter.
Yes, sir.
And we will now allow Mr. West a response to these allegations, either by himself or by his representative. So, Mr.
I'll
West.
respond for Mr. West. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bob French. I'm an old school board attorney from Fort Payne. I'm not going to deal with the 9th charge because Mr. Sanderson kills that charge outright in saying that no facts have been discerned which support a finding that Mr. West in his interactions with superintendent or other administrators has violated any specific law or board policy. I didn't know, since this is the first time this has ever been done in the state of Alabama, I didn't know whether I'd get to talk or not. This is a matter of first impression for all of us. So I had prepared some talking points for my client, and that's what I had to retrieve here. The problem seems to be one that I can readily associate with, and that's old age. You have 3 members of the board who are seniors. At the time the new system came in, they did not understand how to operate under the new system. I earned my way through the University of Alabama selling carbon paper and manual typewriters. I have 2 people hired just to show me how to use my computer. And these people who don't have people working for them every day to put them into a new system without adequate training and without adequate instruction, just to drop it on them and expect them to be able to do it is an unconscionable burden. And what happened here was primarily Mr. Gant could not, he stated in the report that this is all true, that he could not get the agenda. he asked Mr. West to get the agenda for him. Mr. West had great difficulty getting the agenda, but eventually got the agenda. Neither of them knew that there might be anything attached to the agenda, and if there was anything attached, the people were named in letters. The students' names were A, B, and C. The actual names of the students weren't included. And so, if there was an attachment, Mr. West forwarded it to Mr. Gant unknowingly. Then Mr. Gant asked Mr. West to provide some information to Mr. Pruitt. Mr. Pruitt had made a $13,000 contribution to the sports department at Section. He wanted to find out what happened to the money. Did it go through or what? Eventually that money was returned to him by this board, but at the time he was looking to find out where it went. He approached Mr. Gant. Mr. Gant approached Mr. West, and Mr. West sent Mr. Pruitt the agenda. And he had sent him the agenda each time, totally unknowing that there was anything on the agenda other than exactly what was happening at the board meetings. Now remember that before January 2017, documents came to board members through what was called the Dropbox. Well, this all changed, and these people, these elderly people, had a very difficult time in following what was going on. Mr. West did not knowingly, and I've forgotten his name, I know him by a nickname, the attorney that did the examination, he said that Mr. West did not know that he was giving Mr. Pruitt any public document. So Mr. West was totally innocent in this thing so far as intent is concerned. And that's exactly what the examiner finds. And in completing paragraph 23, where Mr. Porter left off, no facts have been discerned that suggest that Mr. West intended to forward any document other than the agenda to the meetings in question, or, this is important, or that any confidential information relating to employees or applicants, and I would include students, were viewed by Mr. Pruitt, Mr. Allen, or any other board members, administrators, or legal counsel of Jackson County Schools. So the whole thing here is a misunderstanding. And I feel that having been a board attorney for a long number of years, that it was incumbent on the board when it changed the system to clearly explain to these people, these elderly people, of which I am one. I'm probably older than all three of them, I guess. I'm 84. So anyway, to explain to these people exactly how this new system was going to work. They did not know how it worked. Mr. Gant didn't know how it worked. Ms. Story didn't know how it worked. Mr. West did not know how it worked. And as a result, we're here today penalizing or considering penalizing Mr. West. I appreciate y'all listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. French. We will now entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second.
Motion and second by Dr. Guest. Mr. Porter, we do have reason.
To discuss the name and character of an individual, you have right to go into executive session.
Okay, and as a point of discussion, to protect the integrity of our executive session and the nature, I would like to request that Mr. Buse and Mr. West excuse themselves from executive session, but be available if the board has questions as we go through this process. Does that sound good?
That's perfect.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second with that. Is there any further discussion or questions, even as it related to my request? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. West says yes. Mr. Story?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
and myself is a yes. So we're now in executive session, and we will try to be as brief as we can. Earl, thank you. We will now entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
I'll make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Mr. Story makes a motion. Mr. Gant seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? We will now vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is a yes, and we are now out of executive session. Next item on our agenda is to address the disciplinary action against Board Member West under the School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012. And I'm going to ask Mr. Porter if he will read this resolution, please.
This is, yes, sir, I will. This is a resolution that was, has been discussed by the board and will be subject to approval by the board. The resolution reads as follows. At a specially called meeting on December 4, 2017, the Jackson County Board of Education met for the purpose of considering the imposition of discipline against Board Member Charles West under the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012, as directed by the board's action on November 1, 2017. The board makes the following findings. Number one, the Jackson County Board of Education is the governing body of Jackson County School District in Jackson County, Alabama. Number two, Mr. Charles West is a duly elected and serving member of the board, having been elected to such position in 2014. Number three, the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012 imposes upon all school board members certain obligations regarding their role and conduct as board members. Number four, the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012 grants the local school boards of education the right to discipline one of its own board members for failing to abide by the act and uphold and support the policies of the board. Number five, the Jackson County Board of Education previously notified member Charles West by letter of November 2nd, 2017 of its intent to consider imposition of discipline, including possible censure and reprimand for neglect of duty or willful misconduct constituting a violation of the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012. Number six, in furtherance of its duties to investigate the stated allegations, the board commissioned William W. Sanderson, Esquire, to conduct an independent investigation of the allegations and to make a report of his investigation to the board. Mr. Sanderson conducted the investigation, including but not being limited to the interviews of board members Charles West and Superintendent Kevin Dukes, and reviewing certain documents provided by Jackson County Board of Education Technology Coordinator. The board has received, reviewed, and considered Mr. Sanderson's full report. In accordance with the Governance Act, Board Member Charles West was given an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and the board has considered his response as presented by his attorney, the Honorable Robert French, Esquire. Therefore, after careful deliberation of the matter, it is resolved by the board as follows. The board finds that that member Charles West did violate policies and procedures, including certain state and federal statutes, by making unauthorized disclosure of confidential board employee and student information to third parties. The board does not condone or tolerate the dissemination of confidential information. Board member Charles West has actively failed to work with the superintendent in promoting the best interests of the Jackson County Schools by interfering with the administration of the day-to-day activities of local schools and school personnel. Based upon such findings, Board member Charles West is reprimanded for his failure to comply with the provisions of the Alabama School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012, and it is directed that he comply with the recommendations contained in Mr. Sanderson's report on page 13, which provides that Mr. West shall exhibit a renewed commitment by Mr. West to provide his input to all board issues and to express his concerns directly to the superintendent rather than to other administrators or employees, should reduce friction and minimize problems resulting from perceived unreasonable interference and micromanagement. The board further recommends that the entire board follow the recommendations of Mr. Sanderson as contained in his report on page 13, which provides that there will be improvements in the means of distribution of board agenda and supporting documentation, which would minimize the risk of compromising sensitive personal information and educational records, while also resulting in better informed board members. Secondly, to conduct board training, including review on the requirements for maintaining confidentiality of sensitive personnel records and educational records which would serve the board well. And thirdly, that the whole board training be conducted on standards required of board members as set out in the board code of conduct, which would promote improved communication and a better understanding of the appropriate role of board members and the administration. Then if it is passed, it continues to read, resolved this 4th day of December, 2017, and the vote will be cast. That's the resolution prepared by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. So we now have to consider a motion to accept the resolution as it pertains to Board Member West and his discipline under the School Board Governance Improvement Act of 2012. Do we have a motion? I'll make that motion.
Second.
Dr. Guest seconds that. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Mr. West?
No.
Mr. West votes no. Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. That passes 4 yeses, 1 no. Next we have announcements. I think our next board meeting will be on the 18th at 5 o'clock. December 18th at 5 o'clock. And under announcements also, we would like to recognize and thank the Jackson County Sheriff's Department for their hard work in making an arrest in the Flat Rock School break-in and burglary. So I think that was actually the same person who broke into Henniger School. So we don't need thieves, especially stealing for kids. So we want to thank the Sheriff's Department for their hard work there. Any other announcements need to come before the board this time? Hearing no more announcements, we will consider a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Mr. Story makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Gant seconds that. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Story?
Yes.
Dr. Guest?
Yes.
Mr. Gant?
Yes.
Myself is yes, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.